Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The election campaigns are starting in Iraq today for the first time since the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime. Several political parties are running in this election, while others have withdrawn. Under tight security, Iraqi Prime Minister Iyad Allawi announced the list of his alliance, which he called the Iraqi list, and declared his candidacy. Allawi discussed the major points of his alliance's platform for Iraq. The first day of campaigning in Iraq coincided with the United States President George Bush's message to Iran and Syria, warning them not to intervene in Iraq's affair, as the Iraqi Minister of Defense Hazem Sha'lan blames violence in Iraq on neighboring countries. As was expected, the Iraqi interim Prime Minister presented a list of 240 candidates who support him. He announced the list during a meeting in Baghdad that was held under tight security measures. Allawi said that the list he presented includes the various religious sects in Iraq.
By depending on God and with a firm determination based on strong confidence in the abilities of our people, we are capable of confronting the difficulties and challenges of making a bright future for our honorable people.
An optimistic future. But while waiting for such a future, the United States President Bush continues to send threatening statements to Iraq's neighbors on the other side of the Atlantic. He made his statements during his meeting with the Italian Prime Minister Berlusconi.
We made it very clear to the countries in the neighborhood, including the two you mentioned, that we expect there to be help in establishing a society in which people are able to elect their leaders.
Earlier, Iraqi Defense Minister Hazem Sha'lan made statements holding Iran and Syria responsible for the violence in the country. He made his statements on the eve of the first day of the election campaign.
There is a large terrorist network in Iraq, the Iranian intelligence, the Syrian intelligence, and the former Iraqi intelligence.
According to a spokesman from the Iranian government, Sha'lan's statements were merely a type of propaganda that serves the Iraqi government internal interests. And an official from the Syrian Foreign Ministry says that Syria refutes President Bush's accusations and described them as baseless.
The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said that Israel is willing to coordinate the unilateral withdrawal plan from Gaza next year with the new Palestinian leadership. In exchange, Sharon says that Israel will not compromise Jerusalem and will never allow for the return of Palestinian refugees or the withdrawal to the 1967 borders. Sharon also said that he expects the Palestinians to fight what he called terrorism as a condition for implementing the roadmap.
Once again, Sharon is using the language of dictation in what he calls the Israeli political dialogue. Using direct and blunt words, Ariel Sharon talked about how the political situation will be like in the next period of time. He emphasized that Israel will maintain Jerusalem and big settlement blocks in the West Bank, and insisted on nullifying the Palestinian right of return and the 1967 borders. In exchange, Sharon is talking about what he calls a historical opportunity on the horizon in order to reach a peaceful solution based on his unilateral withdrawal plan from Gaza. Sharon insists that the unilateral withdrawal plan will be implemented in the scheduled time, which means he is relying on an active Egyptian role, especially on the issue of security, primarily preventing future terrorist operations and stopping arms smuggling. Sharon said this is being coordinated with Cairo through many channels of contact. The Israelis are talking about the unilateral disengagement plan as if it is a painful compromise and confirm They will be willing to discuss the details with the new Palestinian leadership. What Sharon ignored to mention is the fact that no Palestinian leadership can accept what the Israelis are offering. Sharon is talking about implementing the roadmap, but he continues to add conditions to it before implementing it, such as demanding the Palestinians to fight what is known in the American and the Israeli conditions as terrorism and reforming the Palestinian Authority and its institutions. Sharon's vision of the peace process in the next period, according to the speech he gave in Herzliya, can only be explained as a confirmation to Bush's letter of guarantees to Israel.
Palestinian medical sources announced that Israeli occupation forces killed one Palestinian in Gaza while he was trying to cross a road that the Israeli army closed off near a Jewish settlement. Meanwhile, the former American president and Nobel Peace Prize winner Jimmy Carter said that he will send a group of observers to monitor the Palestinian elections next month, as was requested by the Palestinian leadership. The chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Mahmoud Abbas, said that negotiations with Palestinian factions to demilitarize the Intifada are progressing, and pointed out those intensive negotiations with the Hamas movement and other factions in order to reach a ceasefire agreement are still ongoing. As part of his trip to the Gulf, Abbas is currently leading a team of Palestinian delegates on a 3-day visit to Qatar.
Mustafa al-Sawarka, 32 years old, is a Palestinian who joined the new list of martyrs. He is not affiliated with any political organization or faction, but he was still hit by several bullets in several parts of his body because he was walking along with a group of his friends on the Sheikh Ajlan Road near Natsarim settlement. Meanwhile, thousands of Rafah residents walked in the funeral procession of the martyr Salim Sultan, who was killed on Tuesday when Israeli forces randomly shelled the Slam neighborhood along the Egyptian-Israeli border. 2 other civilians were also seriously injured.
Negotiations or security coordination are not the reasons that made the enemy decide to withdraw from Gaza. The enemy was forced to leave because it was defeated by Qassam missiles.
Responding to Abbas's recent statements in which he called for demilitarizing the Intifada and organizing the ownership of weapons, the Islamic resistance movement Hamas emphasized that these calls do not serve the Palestinian plight.
Statements made by Abbas to demilitarize the Intifada contradicts the consensus that our Palestinian nation has reached concerning the legitimacy of the armed resistance. All Palestinian factions agree that the resistance should continue until the Israeli occupation of our land ends.
The Palestinian Legislative Council is holding meetings in preparation for municipal and presidential Palestinian elections. Final amendments to the election laws are being approved before the election campaigns start on the 25th of this month.
Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Mahmoud Abbas voiced optimism that Palestinian hardliners would respond to his call to lay down weapons, even as their representatives were rebuffing his appeal ahead of January elections he is tipped to win. Meanwhile, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who won a Nobel Peace Prize partly for his Middle East peace efforts, said he would head an observer mission to monitor the Palestinian presidential elections. Tala Hudib has a story. After arriving in Qatar from Saudi Arabia on the latest stop of a Gulf tour, Palestinian Liberation Organization head Mahmoud Abbas told AFP there has been progress in the negotiations with Palestinian factions about ending the miniaturization of the Intifada. He stressed intensive discussions were underway with the Hamas and others with a view to reaching an agreement to calm down the situation. Abbas made his remarks as spokesman for Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip rejected his agreement that the use of weapons since the September 2006
start of the second Intifada has been a mistake. Hamas said such declarations run counter to the consensus among Palestinians over the legitimacy of the resistance. It stressed the problem is the Israeli occupation and not the resistance. Abbas' willingness to upset the militants has won him praise from Israel and its key ally, the United States. Abbas said the anticipated agreement will also include the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, an armed offshoot of his mainstream Fatah movement. In the latest violence, 2 Palestinian armed activists were killed in the southern Gaza Strip after wounding 4 Israeli soldiers and a civilian in an ambush. Israeli troops also shot dead a Palestinian man as he tried to cross a Gaza road they had sealed off near a Jewish settlement. Witnesses said another Palestinian man was seriously wounded in a second shooting at the same spot soon afterwards. Separately, Israeli soldiers killed a Palestinian armed with grenades and an assault rifle who was trying to carry out an attack on a Gaza settlement. The army cut occupied Gaza into 3 sections with a series of blockades after an attack Sunday. In the West Bank, militants from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades shot dead a 20-year-old Palestinian man they said had acted as an informer for Israel and dumped his body in the central square of Ramallah. The Israeli army also demolished the family home of a Hamas activist in Hebron. It said gave explosives to suicide bombers who killed 16 people in the Israeli city of Beersheba in August. He was arrested 2 weeks ago.
Another day of attacks, Iraqi Communication Under-Secretary Qasem Mohawi was assassinated in Baghdad. This comes a day after a representative of prominent cleric Grand Ayatollah Said Ali Sistani was injured in an assassination attempt near the holy shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala. However, 10 people were killed and 40 others were injured in the attack.
Bombs in Iraq are still chasing U.S. military convoys. 2 bombs went off as a U.S. military convoy was driving on Baghdad Airport Road in Al-Amil neighborhood. A damaged U.S. military vehicle could be seen at the scene where the blast took place. A U.S. military medical helicopter landed at the scene to evacuate the casualties. Also in Baghdad, the director of Iraq's state-run telecommunications company was killed by armed men at his home in the capital. The communications ministry said Qasim al-Qamhawi was attacked as he was leaving his home in the Al-Jami'ah district in western Baghdad. Elsewhere in Iraq, a known gunman shot dead a major in the Iraqi National Guard and his driver in Ba'quba on Wednesday. The victim was the commander of military operation in Khalis near the city. And in a major attack on Wednesday, 10 people were killed and 40 others injured when a bomb exploded near the western gate of the holy shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala. The injured included Sheikh Abdul Hadi al-Karbala'i, a representative of Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani. Sayyid Ali Sistani's spokesman, Hamid al-Khaffaf, said that the blast was likely an assassination attempt on al-Karbala'i. Police said 2 of his guards were killed and 8 others wounded, adding that the other casualties were civilians. The bloody attack against the holy shrine was not the first. At least 70 people were killed on the 2nd of March when 5 bomb blasts tore through a religious festival of 2 million people. 17 people were killed last year in a similar incident. Meanwhile, U.S. President George W. Bush accused again Iran and Syria of meddling in Iraq after meeting Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi.
Made it very clear to the countries in the neighborhood, including the 2 you mentioned, that we expect there to be help in establishing a society in which people are able to elect their leaders. And that we expect people to work with the Iraqi interim government to enforce border, to stop the flow of people and money that aim to help these terrorists.
His warnings were made after Iraqi Defense Minister Hazim al-Sha'lan accused the 2 neighbors of orchestrating attacks in his country, calling Tehran in particular the most dangerous enemy of Iraq. The deputy commander of the U.S. Central Command, Lieutenant General Lance Smith, however, said the extent of either country's activities was unclear.
He attributed that to lack of intelligence on the sides of the borders. Meanwhile, he said that U.S. forces were dismantling the leadership of Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi's network in Iraq, but acknowledged that Zarqawi has become much more adept at concealing his movements and can probably move safely in areas of Baghdad and can still communicate with his leaders to direct operations.
Lebanese students demonstrated near the French embassy in Beirut and voiced out their refusal of the French banning of freedom of speech represented in its decision against the Al Manar station. Students covered their mouth, symbolizing the silencing of free voices. They held banners of condemnation and called the French government to withdraw its decision. The students then handed one of the officials in the embassy a letter that called the French government to commit to its international treaties that are aimed at respecting the opinion of others.
We, my friends, today came out on the street just to express our feelings towards the declaration taken by France. I think the declaration taken by France wasn't taken only by France. It's not related to political reasons. I'm a student that studies abroad, and I have a lot of French friends. I think this isn't a decision taken by the French. I just want to say that I want to encourage everybody in Europe and France and all around the world that is against this decision to speak up today, because if we don't speak up today, the meaning of democracy is going to change tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
And a day earlier, Lebanese youth organizations held a solidarity sit-in with the Al Manar channel. The candle march started in front of the Lebanese University Directorate and reached the French embassy in Beirut. The demonstrators condemned the French ruling and closed their mouth in protest against the policy of silencing free voices. Arab media and public organizations also reacted to the French ruling against Al Manar and expressed their astonishment and condemnation. Now, this report has more.
Arab media and public organizations reacted similarly to the French court ruling to ban Al Manar channel from broadcasting in Europe. They all agree with great astonishment that France yielded to Zionist pressure to silence an Arab media outlet which primarily deals with the Arabs' prime and most important topic, Palestine. Palestinians in general view Al Manar channel to be on top of the very few Arab channels that deal with their cause.
As Palestinian journalists, we hope that the French government reconsiders its decision, particularly that this country has many honorable positions as to the Palestinian and Iraqi causes.
Banning Al Manar's broadcast in Europe drew concerns among the Syrian media society, which sees itself in the same position with Al Manar. The main concern is that the charges used against the channel could target every Arab media outlet that transmits whatever the Zionist community finds inconvenient.
First of all, because Al Manar's status is the same as ours. It's a member of the Arab Nations Broadcast Union. Secondly, because Al Manar is a national Arab channel that is accordingly playing its role. Thirdly, Al Manar and all of us Arabs are very far from being anti-Semitic, because from the historical point of view, we are Semitic. We are also very far from being supporters of terrorism, because he who demands his rights is not a terrorist.
Iranian Foreign Minister Kamal Kharazi pointed that Al Manar acquired a major level of importance internationally. Kharazi added that if France banned the freedom of speech, then it cannot claim that it supports freedom. However, those lurking Arab media seem to be determined to veil the undistorted word and image from the international community. According to Moroccans, this puts Arab communities in front of great and historic responsibilities, calling them to really consider how things have turned out.
I feel very sorry that we do not have the same power to exert pressure equal to the Zionist pressure.
The vast majority of the Arab public opinion insist they do not find strange Israeli and Zionist attempts to silence free Arab media outlets. They do not find it odd that these two sides spread anti-Arabism, which is eventually anti-Semitism, but they find it unusual that France, the country they consider a model for freedom, yield to blackmail.
Leaders will be deciding whether to accept Turkey into the European Union at a two-day summit in Brussels. The European Commission president has said accepting Turkey will be a historical decision and urged Ankara to go the extra mile to show Europeans it is ready for EU membership talks. José Manuel Barroso said Turkey's case into the European Union is not ordinary because of the country's size, historical background, geographical situation, and its potential role as a bridge between Europe and the Islamic world. Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan lobbied EU leaders intensively hours before the start of a crucial summit, but said that he would drop his country's demand to become a member if demands set are too difficult. Turkey's hopes were boosted yesterday when French President Jacques Chirac went on television to spell out his belief that Turkish accession would spread stability and security, provided that Ankara met EU conditions. If EU leaders agree to accept Turkey as a member, terms would then be started to negotiations after 40 years of waiting.
Our vision for Turkey is clear. We are not looking for some kind of halfway house or midway deal. If we start negotiations with Turkey, it should be with full European Union membership in mind. There must be no last-minute conditions, no new hurdles to overcome. I believe the time to start negotiations with Turkey has come.
Prime Minister Ariel Sharon reconfirmed today that calm on the Palestinian side will be met with a similar calmness from the side of the Israelis. Responding to a question about a ceasefire agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, he said, "This is an agreement between the Palestinian groups among themselves, and Israel has nothing to do with it." Mr. President, you speak of achievements, and yesterday Egyptian newspapers reported there is a room to reach a ceasefire agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Do you believe there is an opportunity to reach a ceasefire?
The ceasefire agreement they are talking about is a ceasefire between the Palestinians themselves, between the leadership and various terrorist organizations. We are not part of this ceasefire agreement. If calm prevails, I'm sure there will be calm from our side as well. Of course, this will happen when we no longer have to have discussions about terrorist operations or ticking bombs.
The wife of jailed Fatah leader Marwan Barghouti is expected to announce that her husband is pulling out of the Palestinian presidential elections scheduled for January 9th. Fadwa Barghouti yesterday traveled from Ramallah to Beersheba to meet her husband in prison. Barghouti's decision not to run was reportedly made during a meeting today, which was attended by some of his aides along with Israeli MK Talib al-Sana. However, there is also a conflicting report. Ahmed Ghanim, a member of Fatah's High Committee in the West Bank and a Barghouti campaigner who met with a potential candidate late last night, told the AFP news agencies that Barghouti still intends to run. A Jerusalem magistrate's court released Palestinian presidential candidate Bassam al-Sakhi from prison last night. Al-Sakhi was arrested at the Aram checkpoint in the West Bank earlier in the day when he tried to enter Jerusalem. The member of the Communist People Party's faction in the PLO was being held on suspicion that he attacked police officers. Officials intend to charge al-Sakhi with both attacking police and attempting to enter Jerusalem without a proper permit. Yasser Arafat may have died of unnatural causes. This according to his nephew, Nasser al-Kidwa, who today handed over the 558-page French medical report on Arafat's death to the Palestinian Authority. Al-Kidwa said that the lack of a clear cause of death raised suspicions that the former Palestinian leader was poisoned. On the other hand, Al-Kidwa repeated earlier comments, quoting French doctors saying that they found no traces of any known poison. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell told top officials from North African, Middle Eastern, and Asian countries that peace between Israel and the Palestinians cannot be rushed. At the opening of the Democratization Conference in Rabat, Morocco today, he stressed the link between democracy and economic development. Powell told participants that change can only come from within and that Palestinians must first elect a president before both sides can begin to execute the U.S.-backed roadmap peace plan.
Today in Rabat, government, business, and civil society representatives from across the broader Middle East and North Africa have come together in common cause. With the support of their partners from the Group of Eight, they are addressing the challenges and opportunities of building a future full of hope. As President Bush said at Sea Island, we must help the reformers of the Middle East as they work for freedom.
1,800 police officers and volunteers riding in more than 500 vans took part in a wide-scale operation overnight under the banner Helping Young People Protect Their Lives. The effort, the largest of its kind this year, was aimed at enforcing traffic laws. Police confiscated 148 licenses of drivers traveling over the speed limit. 50 drivers were caught driving under the influence of alcohol. 77 cars were taken off the roads due to safety defects, and more than 1,700 fines were issued. Professors Avraham Hershko and Aaron Chechanover received the Nobel Prize for Chemistry at a ceremony in Sweden's capital yesterday evening. The pair became the first Israelis to win the most prestigious prize in the scientific world. The scientists took the prize for conducting a protein cell study highly relevant for cancer research. Chechanover, age 57, director of the Rappaport Family Institute for Research in Medical Sciences at the Technion in Haifa, and Hershko, 67, a professor at the institute, were honored by the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences for their work in the 1980s that led to the discovery of one of the cell's most important cyclical processes, regulated protein degradation. The scientists will share the $1.25 million prize with Professor Erwin Rose, age 78, of the University of California.
Today in Casablanca, a marathon was organized in honor of the disabled championship team that represented Morocco in the Olympics in Athens in Europe and Arab competitions in Algeria. They were awarded with medals during a recent competition. Reporting are Amina Kabab and Nadia Alyoubi.
Today, the city of Casablanca held a celebration honoring the disabled who participated in the Olympics and the Arab competition in Algeria. Today's rally is in recognition of their honorable representation of Morocco in these competitions, as demonstrated by their winning awards. A clear message was conveyed about the need to recognize the important role of the disabled in society.
They are sending this message to raise awareness in the media and for officials and decision makers, so that they make decisions while keeping in mind this part of our society. After all, they are members of our society and deserve the opportunities and rights that enable them to become active participants. Today's rally was attended by His Majesty the King, and they were his guests in the city of Nidalgo.
A large number of able-bodied people turned out today to run in the marathon alongside the disabled participants. The message they wanted to convey is that disabled people are capable of fulfilling their dreams.
Participating in the marathon is a way of encouraging the disabled. I'm here with my children. I'm here to be with my disabled sister and my brothers, and with all the people.
Honoring the disabled that participated in the Olympic Games is in effect honoring all of the disabled persons who challenge their disability.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.